beloved wife, children, home, stable job. What else is needed for happiness? Nothing is needed. But as a rule, if everything is calm in your life and everything is going well, then trouble is waiting for you soon. I do not know who came up with this law, but it is there. And the most important thing is to be prepared for bad times. Otherwise, you can lose heart, and everything will be much worse. Unfortunately, I was not ready. Or rather, I did not even realize that my wife would cheat on me, and the worst thing was that I saw it. My wife, Elaine, had ESP. Seriously. Initially, I was skeptical too, but over our years together, the instances where she predicted events before they happened became too frequent to ignore. She could identify who was calling before we picked up the phone. She'd insist we take a different highway route, only for us to later discover the original path was blocked. Her premonitions about purchases often proved true, prompting us to delay decisions. We both became convinced her ESP was genuine. Elaine was also a vivid dreamer. Nearly every morning she'd wake eager to recount her dreams from the night before. Some were funny, others eerily accurate, as if her dreams were another form of her ESP. We adapted to these abilities. We married, had 2 wonderful children, John and Mary, both now off at university, leaving Elaine and me to ourselves at home. Things took a turn when I noticed Elaine hadn't been eagerly sharing her dreams with me for nearly 2 weeks. "Lainey, you haven't been telling me about your dreams lately. What's going on?" I asked over breakfast. "Oh," she responded, a bit flustered. "They've been too strange, even for me." "I don't think you need to hear them," she added. "Now every husband knows when that comment is made, it's an invitation to dig deeper. Come on, Lainey. You've been sharing your dreams with me our whole married life. Why stop now?" Because, she hesitated. "Because you might not like what you hear. There, I've said it. Please, let's leave it." Elaine's sudden outburst caught me off guard. Whatever she was grappling with must have been deeply challenging for her to consider not sharing it. Her dreams had always covered diverse topics, so I never knew what to expect each morning. But this was different, more intense, as I pondered the possibilities of what she might be avoiding. Her parents' deaths, the early scare with John right after his birth, Mary's mysterious disappearance when she was 18, or perhaps her past boyfriends. I decided to let it rest for now. I knew she would open up in her own time, and I needed to be patient, as any good husband should be. Reflecting on my own role, I considered myself a reliable husband, despite not boasting about it. With a career as an accountant, I provided a stable, if not extravagant, income that supported our middle-class lifestyle. I was generally level-headed, slow to anger, but always ready to appreciate life's humor. Our home was a place of laughter and good-natured fun, though there were certainly challenging moments in raising our 2 children, along with the moments of pure joy. Elaine and I had developed a deeply comfortable relationship. Following the intense passion of our early years together, we settled into a quieter, unspoken partnership where occasional bursts of our old fire would emerge. We both accepted this evolution, often discussing it without any regrets about how our lives were unfolding. Our finances were solid, our health robust, with the promise of grandchildren on the horizon and opportunities for travel. Everything was going well. However, Elaine was clearly troubled by a recurring dream that had been weighing heavily on her for weeks. One morning, as I was preparing breakfast, she rushed in and sat down abruptly. "Bill, I have to talk to you about this dream. It's tormenting me." Elaine seemed almost distraught. We had always been open with each other, even if it sometimes led to uncomfortable conversations and heated debates. My calm demeanor balanced her emotional outbursts perfectly. Usually our arguments were short-lived as we found compromise and often ended up laughing or reconnecting intimately. As I poured the coffee, I waited for her to start her tale. This should be interesting, I thought, noticing how nervous Elaine appeared, her hands fidgeting in that familiar way when she was deeply focused. "Bill, I had a dream that I would see James before I die." Before it's all over, Elaine began, her voice fraught with emotion. Wow, I thought. She's contemplating her own mortality now. This is new. Now I'm concerned. I keep having this dream every night, she continued urgently. It's becoming more and more insistent. I just can't shake it. You know who I'm talking about, right? James. James Sloop, the young man I met in New Zealand many years ago. Now she gazed at me with those desperate eyes, a rare sight for Elaine. I knew James Sloop, though I'd only met him once, the day after our wedding. The story goes that when Elaine was 18, she and a close friend embarked on a 2-week tour of New Zealand's main islands. It was a thrilling experience for her, as she had previously traveled overseas only with her parents. This time she was essentially on her own. The tour group was camping-based, traveling primarily by bus, fostering close bonds among its members during the long rides. While not exclusively for 18-year-olds, most were around that age. James was also part of the group, and he and Elaine became very close during the tour. Back then, I didn't know Elaine well. We were merely in the same school system. However, I later saw pictures from the tour that clearly showed their closeness. By then, Elaine and I were already a couple, and I had to suppress feelings of jealousy upon realizing that the love of my life had been close, possibly intimate, with another man. I reasoned with myself that it was in the past and our present was different. I, too, had past relationships to reconcile with. I was a bit annoyed when the day after our wedding we had to delay our honeymoon until James could come over to give his wedding gift. I agreed reluctantly because Elaine's family insisted on waiting. James had taken a late flight from New Zealand and could only make it that morning, having missed the actual wedding. Poor James, flying all that way and missing the wedding, Elaine's mom commented. She seemed to know more about James and Elaine than I did, though she was supportive of our decision to marry. I always felt that Elaine's mom would have been just as happy if Elaine had married James. It was just a feeling, never expressed outright. They treated me with the respect due to a son-in-law, and I held them in high regard. They were welcoming, and I came to love them like my own parents. A flawless wedding celebration was crucial to Elaine's mom, and the thought of someone traveling so far only to miss seeing the happy couple was almost unbearable to her. Bill, please be patient. There's no rush. You have your whole lives ahead of you. So Elaine and I waited. As the airport taxi pulled up to the driveway, I noticed a strikingly handsome man stepping out. He had a similar build to mine and sported flawless, almost blonde hair. His complexion was smooth as a baby's skin, without a single blemish. I was impressed by how suave he looked after such a long flight. Elaine rushed over to him immediately. You made it, James. I wasn't sure you'd manage. My instinct to assert my presence surged, but the public setting and everyone's admiring comments kept me composed. The greetings were warm and affectionate. James presented a wedding gift, a luxurious leather bag. Very generous, I thought. I'm sure I'll find it useful. And with that, we departed, never to encounter James again. Yes, Lainey, I remember James. So why did you need to see him so urgently in your dream? I prodded gently, hoping to coax the details of Elaine's dream from her. I knew discussing it often eased any anxiety her dreams caused. There was no reason, Bill. That's the strange part. Just a strong feeling that I had to see him before my life ends. It was incredibly vivid, Bill. I'm serious about this. I have to go. I found myself in a dilemma. Elaine's ESP had proven real and influential in our lives. Acting on her intuition had often been beneficial, though ESP, like driving with a muddy windshield, offered only glimpses of what lay ahead. Many had suffered from relying solely on intuition for life-changing decisions. I knew I had to temper this urgency and allow events to unfold naturally. We were both retired, so there was nothing physically stopping us from going to New Zealand. After all, it was a country on our bucket list, and we had already planned to go there in September, which was still 9 months away. I wondered if our discussions about this upcoming trip had sparked the dream in the first place, but deep down I had a nagging feeling that it might not be such a good idea. Yes, I had gut feelings too. Now that I'm older and my gut is expanding, so are my feelings. Ha! I approached her and hugged her tightly from behind. Lainey, I know you feel like this needs to happen now, but let's hold off. We were going to go in September anyway, so can you wait until then? She nodded. Looking into her eyes, I could see she understood the logic of waiting, but there was still a sense of urgency. We stayed in the embrace for some time until she seemed to calm down. I cherished these hugs. They were always warm and reassuring. Over our married life, we had perfected the art of the perfect hug, neither too tight nor too loose, just right to convey our longing for closeness. September couldn't come soon enough for Elaine. Since revealing her secret to me, she had been consumed with it. She scoured every social media platform to find James. She discovered him and learned all about his life. Married once, 3 grown kids. Divorced and living alone in Queenstown, South Island. What a coincidence. Queenstown was exactly where we planned to stay during our trip to New Zealand. She meticulously planned our trip, buying tickets and booking hotels. Then she messaged him to inform him of our whereabouts and schedule. I felt a bit uneasy about that, but I accepted it because I understood how important it was to Elaine. She needed to resolve something on this visit. Based on my experience with her, I knew that if things didn't go as planned and give her closure, it would bother her for months. However, I trusted Elaine completely. We had been married for a long time, and she often expressed her deep feelings for me romantically, saying, "Bill, without you, I would feel lost. You are my life and my love." Her words and many others like them solidified my trust in her. Elaine is attractive and sometimes draws curious glances from men. I've witnessed her handle such situations, confidently reaffirming our strong relationship. I believed wholeheartedly in the trust we shared. I'm not inclined to jump to conclusions over minor uncertainties. That's for couples with less stable relationships. Besides, her schedule only included one meeting with James, so it wasn't the sole purpose of our trip. Perhaps it was the catalyst that motivated us to go, but we had many other reasons for visiting the place. Air New Zealand touched down in Queenstown with 2 passengers filled with anticipation. Elaine eagerly anticipated her planned activities while I was looking forward to skiing at the Remarkables and visiting Glenorchy, famed for its Lord of the Rings filming locations. An aspiration inspired by my love for the series. Our hotel room overlooked Lake Wakatipu, providing a romantic backdrop. Elaine promptly called James upon arrival, and we made plans to dine together that evening. The evening exceeded expectations. James behaved impeccably throughout, dedicating considerable time to me. Surprisingly, I found myself quite fond of him. He had a knack for conversation, effortlessly steering clear of dead topics. His youthful appearance from his teenage years served him well. He looked a decade younger than his actual age and was evidently in great shape. His blonde hair, a familiar sight from years ago, now adorned his head proudly. He was dressed like a businessman and exuded confidence in everything he did. Elaine seemed content to stay in the background for most of our conversation, but I could tell she was hanging on his every word. We discussed our families and how retirement was treating us. Any initial apprehensions I had were quickly fading, and by the end of the night we agreed to meet again in 3 days. Interestingly, one of James's uncles owned a vineyard in the Otago region, and coincidentally both Elaine and I were enthusiasts of Pinot Noir wine. Adjustments would need to be made to Elaine's detailed itinerary to accommodate this new opportunity, but given the company and the chance, it seemed entirely worthwhile. "James appears quite charming," I remarked as we got undressed in our hotel room later that night. "He really knows how to captivate an audience. He had me engaged in conversation all evening. It was almost like he was pulling strings, guiding our discussions effortlessly. He'd make a fantastic salesman." He truly was the entertainer, And you're spot on, Laney replied. He seemed to intuitively know when to switch topics. He had you figured out, Bill. It was amusing to watch and listen to both of you. And to answer your question, yes, it was worth it. He's changed a lot since we were 18. He's lost some of his innocence, as we all do with age. I'm glad we caught up with him. Thank you, Bill. I love you. I really appreciate what you did for me. Now let's get to bed so we can show each other just how much we love each other. To be honest, Laney, it wasn't hard to fall under his spell tonight, Bill admitted. I ended up quite liking him. Now, about this bed you mentioned? The following day was designated for skiing, a passion shared by both Elaine and me. Despite our enthusiasm, our skiing skills were somewhat limited by our modest incomes, which meant we couldn't afford to frequent the glamorous ski resorts popular among the wealthy. Bundled up in layers of clothing to shield ourselves from the biting wind, we joined the line at the ski lift. In a moment of folly, I chose to tackle the intermediate slope, while Elaine wisely opted for the easier one, perhaps a classic case of bravado. Skiing at the Remarkables was indeed remarkable. The scenery, particularly the distant town of Queenstown, was breathtaking. As I started my descent down the slope, I soon noticed that there weren't many other skiers around. Initially, I chalked it up to good luck, but as I looked further down, I realized why. The section of slope I was on had a treacherous patch of hard, slippery snow towards the end. I spotted it, too late. Despite my efforts to veer off, I lost control on the slick surface. My momentum carried me straight towards a cluster of small trees, abruptly halting my descent, and breaking my leg in the process. Fortunately, the resort's medical team responded swiftly, transporting me to Queenstown's hospital without delay. Throughout the ordeal, Elaine hovered nearby, offering concerned reassurances while the medical staff attended to me. It wasn't until I found myself settled in a hospital bed that we both shared a laugh, despite the pain in my leg, at the irony of our predicament. Wow, Bill, you really know how to make the most of a vacation abroad, Elaine joked. I knew I had to plan this trip meticulously for a reason. The doctor says your injury isn't too severe, but considering your age, you'll need to stay here for at least 2 days, and then it'll be crutches, or maybe even a moon boot. Hey, let's not dwell on age, old woman. I know this has thrown a wrench into our plans, but we'll figure something out. I'm sorry, Laney. I should have realized my limits on the slopes. But, and I emphasize the word, this is a great opportunity for you to do things you didn't plan but always wanted to. Shopping, for instance, wasn't on our agenda. I know how much you love it. Now's your chance to shop to your heart's content, without me tagging along outside every store, waiting while you browse and decide not to buy anything. Go on, woman. Go forth and shop. As I spoke, we heard giggles and turned to see the duty nurse, Courtney, struggling to contain her laughter at my outburst. Elaine was now bursting with laughter. It was something I cherished about our relationship. We could still make each other laugh even after all these years together. It was a testament to our comfort and love for each other. All right, my dear husband. Challenge accepted. 2 days of unlimited shopping for me while you relax in this luxurious hotel with meals and room service. Deal? I asked Courtney. Can I fill the next 2 days with non-stop shopping? Courtney looked at Elaine seriously and replied, This town was practically made for shopping, eating, and partying. Elaine responded, I'm not so sure about the partying, but shopping and eating both sound perfect. She turned to me again. Do you think you'll manage to visit the vineyard with James? The promise of endless glasses of fine Pinot might do wonders for your leg. And since I'll be busy spending our money on fine clothes and gourmet food, you'll need to treat yourself as well. I'm not sure, Laney. Using crutches might be a bit restrictive, and the antibiotics might not interact well with alcohol. We'll have to wait and see, but seriously, go enjoy some shopping. The next morning, Elaine dropped by for breakfast, and as soon as the shops opened, she was off. See you tonight, dear, she said as she left the ward. Courtney, the nurse, watched her enthusiastic departure and remarked, Hope your credit card's ready, Mr. Yates. Everything in this town comes with a tourist tax. She chuckled as she left the room, too. I wasn't thrilled about spending the whole day watching TV in the hospital room alone, but the visits from nurses and food service staff offering snacks and tea helped pass the time. I got to know them well, especially Courtney, who was a local. That evening, just as I was contemplating the hospital dinner, Elaine burst in, full of excitement. "Hey, how's your leg? You'll never guess who I bumped into today. James. Turns out he's more of a shopaholic than me. We spent the entire day hitting every shop in sight. I swear I didn't max out the credit card. You should see the prices here. Actually, maybe you shouldn't. Your accountant brain would go wild. Having a local guide was fantastic, though. James knew all the best spots to shop and eat." She rattled off all this in one breath, then kissed me and settled into a chair beside my bed. We exchanged glances before I responded to her numerous questions. "Hi, Lainey. Good to see you. Yep, the leg's okay. Still a bit sore, but the painkillers help. The swelling's gone down, so the doc says that's a good sign. Maybe getting older isn't such a hindrance after all. So, how was your shopping trip with James?" She proceeded to recount in detail the day's events and how James had assisted her. She also mentioned James had promised to help again the next day. While I trusted Elaine, I couldn't ignore the sparkle in her eyes as she recounted the day. She stayed until 8 that evening. As she left, she turned to me and said, "Guess what, Bill? I didn't have that dream last night. It's gone. Isn't that great?" I nodded and waved her goodbye. That night, I slept deeply under the influence of medication. My leg had been giving me considerable pain, so a painkiller injection was necessary. The next morning, I woke suddenly, realizing two things: how late it was, and that Elaine sat beside me, looking exhausted and anxious. "Hey, sleepyhead," she hoarsely greeted me. "I was afraid I'd have to head out without talking to you. The nurse mentioned your leg was acting up last night and they had to knock you out with strong meds. How are you feeling now?" Her worried expression prompted me to downplay my discomfort. "Hey, Lainey," I murmured groggily. "I'm okay. Looks like I might be here a bit longer, though. The doctor found some issues with blood vessels last night after scanning my leg. There's a hint of a hematoma. Rest and medication are the plan for now. What about you? Did you sleep well? You look a bit tired yourself. Did that dream bother you again?" There was a brief hesitation in her response, but I didn't dwell on it. "No, Bill, I didn't have that dream. I'm really relieved about that. It's been haunting me for so long, it feels strange not to dream it anymore. Anyway, I was planning to go shopping today, but should I stay with you instead? You don't look too great today." "Lainey, I'll probably just be dozing off all day. Go enjoy your shopping day like we planned. The stores are probably open already." She left the room again and I drifted in and out of sleep while Nurse Courtney visited me periodically while I was on medication. "Your wife sure knows how to dance, Mr. Yates," she remarked cryptically. "But be cautious of the company she keeps. That man she's with is trouble, mark my words." Then she disappeared again, leaving me to contemplate her warning in my half-conscious state. I wasn't sure if what I heard was a hallucination or not, but I wasn't fully awake to process it, so I went back to sleep. I woke up to the smell of dinner beside me on the table. Eating helped me regain my senses, though it made my throbbing leg even more noticeable. After dinner, I propped myself up with pillows, half sitting, half lying down. That's when Elaine walked in, looking tired and a bit restless. "Hi, Bill. Sorry I'm a bit late. How was dinner?" She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. "Hi, Lainey. The usual hospital fare. They do their best, but it's not quite like home-cooked meals. How was your day? Should I start looking for a part-time job to pay off the credit cards when I get home?" Elaine smiled. "No need, Bill. James took care of most things today." She paused as if stopping herself from saying more. There was an awkward silence until Nurse Courtney came in to check my vitals. She exchanged a meaningful look with Elaine, the kind that women seem to master early in life. Elaine finally looked away and addressed me. "So, Bill, tomorrow's the planned visit to the vineyard and winery. I guess you won't be able to make it. That's a shame. This leg of yours is really giving you a hard time. I'll come by tomorrow and spend the day with you." As she said this, she glanced at Courtney, who almost nodded in agreement. I couldn't help but wonder what was going on between those two, I thought to myself. It's like they have their own secret language of gestures and nods. I resolved to ask Courtney about it sometime soon. It seemed I would be here for a while. I considered asking Elaine, but I knew she was eager to do more shopping. "No, Lainey, I really appreciate you coming by when you can. I miss having you around, but I know sitting in a hospital isn't exactly thrilling. I know you want to be here with me, but it's your holiday too. I feel bad that my little stunt is eating into your vacation time. Go enjoy yourself at the vineyard. Just promise me you'll bring back a good bottle of wine for us to share when I'm out of here." Elaine couldn't contain her excitement. "Okay, thanks, Bill. I'll see you later tonight. And be nice to the nurses." With that, she left. Courtney lingered in the room briefly before attending to someone else. I called her over. "Courtney, can I have a word with you?" She hesitated but stayed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Yates. I shouldn't have mentioned anything earlier. I apologize if I overstepped." "Courtney, you mentioned something about my wife being a good dancer and to watch out for some snake or something like that. I was a bit out of it at the time. Is there something I should know? And how do you know Elaine is a good dancer?" Courtney's face drained of color, but she approached and took a seat beside the bed. "Mr. Yates, what I have to tell you is something you probably won't want to hear. Last night my friends and I went to the Pink Panther Cat, a popular nightclub in town known for its cheap drinks and dancing. Around 9 o'clock I saw Mrs. Yates come in. She was with James Sloop, a notorious womanizer in our area. He has a way with women, and once he turned on his charm, I nearly found myself in a compromising situation at his apartment. He's quite skilled at that. I watched them for a while, and it was clear Mrs. Yates was very close to him." She paused briefly. "I'm not sure how to say this delicately, Mr. Yates, but she was very intimate with him. He had his arm around her most of the night, and during slow dances they were even closer, almost like a couple. I saw his hands wander too low and his lips too close to hers. They left around 11, but I don't know where they went. He was still holding her closely, and they even stopped to kiss while waiting for a taxi. I'm deeply sorry, Bill. May I call you Bill? It's against my professional ethics to tell you this, but I felt you needed to know." With a stifled sob, she left the room. "Whoa," I exclaimed aloud. This information caught me completely off guard. I couldn't have imagined anything like this from Elaine, not in a million years. There had to be a perfectly innocent explanation for everything. I've always trusted Elaine throughout our entire marriage. There has never been any hint, either implied or explicit, that she would betray me. She has always been the epitome of a loyal, loving wife and partner. She is the wonderful mother of our 2 children, who adore her for her unwavering dedication and love. I admire her for the same reasons. She is my chosen companion in this life, and we, or at least I thought we, looked forward to growing old together, enjoying whatever life had in store for us, side by side. This visit to James was meant to be a one-time thing. I liked him. He seemed reliable, and I was somewhat glad when he took Elaine under his wing while I was recovering here. I still felt guilty about ruining our holiday with my silly accident on the slopes. Could this all have been planned? There's no way my accident was orchestrated, so how did things escalate so quickly to what Courtney described? Elaine isn't someone who acts impulsively. She usually takes her time with decisions. This behavior isn't typical for her. She only reconnected with him, 2 days ago? The first time they met, I was there too. He barely paid any attention to her. If he had intentions towards Elaine, he would have been showering her with attention right from the start. My mind was in turmoil and my leg was hurting again. I pressed the call button and Courtney entered the room. "Do you live here?" I asked her jokingly. "Seems like you're always around when I'm awake. What's the deal with you nurses?" Courtney smiled and replied, "Mr. Yates, us nurses work odd shifts. Sometimes I finish at 10:30 and start again at 6 in the morning. Sometimes we have split shifts. The system doesn't treat us well, but thankfully we enjoy taking care of patients like you. So, what can I do for you today? Is your leg bothering you again, or is it something else?" She glanced at me knowingly, a hint of pity in her eyes, which I could do without, but I wasn't about to take it out on someone as dedicated and honest as Nurse Courtney. "You're right, it's a bit of both, but I think only the leg can be fixed with medication. I'll call the doctor on duty to come and take a look at your leg. Just hang in there, no pun intended, as he's got a few other patients to attend to first." As she turned to leave, I asked, "Courtney, could I have a phone for a little while? I need to make some calls." "Sure thing. It's not standard procedure here, but since there aren't bedside phones in this ward, I'll see what I can do." "You're an angel, Courtney," I said gratefully as she exited. "I've been called that before, Mr. Yates?" The doctor arrived shortly after and examined my leg again. "Your leg is healing well, Mr. Yates. There might still be some residual pain as your blood vessels return to normal. The swelling has reduced significantly, which is a good sign. I'll give you some painkillers, but I don't think you need an injection anymore. Get some rest and you should be out of here in a couple of days." The phone arrived shortly afterward. The hospital orderly who delivered it explained its use and informed me that all calls would be charged to my account. He also gave me a paper copy of the local phone directory. My first call was to our hotel, where the receptionist, recognizing me, greeted me politely and inquired about my leg. We talked about the accident and my recovery. In a light-hearted tone, I jokingly asked if my wife had caused any trouble, throwing wild parties in the room while I was away. The receptionist continued casually and joked back, "No, Mr. Yates, no big parties. She only had your brother over last night." She introduced me to him when he arrived at 11:30. He seemed nice, and I thought he looked familiar, perhaps a local, though I wasn't sure given how many people pass through. I updated her on my return plans as per the doctor's advice and ended the call. It struck me as unusual. Receptionists don't typically disclose such information freely. I wondered if, like Nurse Courtney, she sensed something was amiss and was subtly giving me a heads up. As I pieced together the facts, anger simmered within me. Elaine spends the day shopping with James, who is unusually helpful. Elaine goes out dancing with James. They are seen being overly familiar on the dance floor. They kiss as they leave. Later that night, they arrive together at our hotel room. This morning, Elaine enters the hospital room looking tired yet excited, and today they are spending the day together again. The list was alarming. My emotions turned to anger, and I could feel it simmering inside me. Alongside my disbelief in the facts, it was surprising I could maintain any logical composure. I rarely get angry quickly. I usually find other ways to calm down, often discussing things with my life partner. But could I do that now? How would I broach this with Elaine? I needed to be certain before confronting her, as accusing her falsely could severely damage our relationship. She would be devastated. I called Elaine's mobile next, but it went to voicemail. I left a calm message asking about her day and suggesting we talk later when she visited the hospital. Then I called the hotel receptionist again and asked her to have Elaine call me when she arrived. As I was about to give her the hospital number, she stopped me. "I can't do that, Mr. Yates. Mrs. Yates and your brother arrived about 10 minutes ago and went straight to your room with a box of wine. They're there now. Would you like me to page the room for you?" My heart seemed to stop. I focused intensely on the receptionist's voice. "They're in the room now, Mr. Yates." I couldn't believe it had come to this. Did Elaine use illegal substances? What had happened to her? The woman I knew seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who looked like her but was behaving completely differently. This wasn't like her. This wasn't like her at all. The receptionist's urgent voice snapped me out of my daze. Mr. Yates, are you still there, Mr. Yates? I managed to mutter some kind of response and hung up. I found myself at a loss. Trapped in that room, events unfolded beyond my influence. What options did I have? Lost in thought, Nurse Courtney entered to take my vitals. Mr. Yates, you look awful. Are you feeling okay? Please lie down. Let's check your blood pressure, etc. Just relax, she said, gently guiding me onto the bed and wrapping the cuff around my arm. As the machine hummed, her expression grew concerned. Your blood pressure is too high, Mr. Yates. You need to calm down. Is there anything I can do? Her worry deepened when she noticed I had been making calls. Is it about what we discussed earlier? She asked. I nodded grimly and shared my discoveries. Oh, Mr. Yates, Bill. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. This is all my fault. I triggered these doubts and investigations. Her distress was evident. I reassured her it wasn't her fault and that I would have found out eventually. Is there anything I can do, Bill? I pondered deeply over that. What could a nurse confined here in the hospital possibly accomplish? She was just as trapped as I was. Then it struck me that there might be a way to gather evidence of Elaine's alleged actions. I needed proof before I could take any action. Courtney, do any of your friends have free time right now? I asked. I would compensate them well for their time. I need them available tonight and tomorrow. She paused, thinking, and then her face lit up as she remembered someone. Yes, Nicole, a nursing student, is currently on her days off. I'm sure she could use the extra money. You know how students are. What exactly did you want her to do? I explained my plan, and Courtney promptly called Nicole with my offer. It seemed to take some convincing, but once Courtney mentioned the generous payment, any objections appeared to vanish. Damn, my leg was hurting. That night, without a doubt, Elaine entered, looking cheerful and visibly excited. She wore a smug, satisfied expression on her face. Hi, Bill. Missed you today. How is your leg? You don't look too well. Hi, Elaine. My leg is a bit better. The doctor said I'll be out in 2 days, so sorry. You might have to manage a bit longer on your own. Don't worry about me, Bill. I can take care of myself. By the way, the trip to the vineyard was really fun. We spent the whole day there. I'm surprised I can walk straight after all the tastings we did. James and his brother gave me a full tour of the entire operation. I'm sorry you missed it. We just made it back in time for me to come here. I have to admit I'm exhausted. Would you mind if I leave early tonight? I really need to get some rest. Tomorrow, remember, we plan to drive to Glenorchy? The driver is still arranged, so I'll go. I promise to take lots of pictures for you. She stood to leave. Sure. Thanks, Elaine. I'll see you tomorrow night then. No point in you coming here so early if you have to meet the driver. Love you. See you then. She looked down as she replied. Love you too, Bill. Now I was certain that what they said about Elaine was true. She had outright lied to me about spending the entire day at the vineyard. She hadn't. She had been in the hotel room with James for at least half the day. Her other remarks began to sound different. All those tastings we did. I need to get to bed. I'm so tired. It's a wonder I can walk straight. I was so disturbed that I couldn't trust anything she said anymore. What had Elaine, my Laney, done to my perception of her? I spoke directly with Nicole and explained in detail what I needed her to do. She appeared almost eager about the task, but I couldn't share her excitement. What I had requested would cost me a significant amount of money, and might even lead to the end of my marriage. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, not because of my sore leg, but due to the constant ache in my heart. I dreaded the pain that awaited me and my family. If true, how could I confront Elaine about all of this? This accusation was far more serious than any previous disagreement we'd had. Its consequences would be everlasting. And what about our children? How would this affect them? I knew I could never trust Elaine again. I've heard stories of couples forgiving each other, but this struck at the very foundation of our relationship. I understand that intimacy is a physical act, but in a serious relationship, it becomes an intimate expression of love. To betray that exclusivity is to betray that love. If this were true, every word and action from Elaine henceforth would be scrutinized for truthfulness. What kind of relationship would that be? Certainly not one I could be a part of. I needed more evidence. The next 2 days would determine if Nicole could obtain what I sought, a prospect that both excited and worried me. As it turned out, those 2 days passed swiftly. The doctor permitted me to return to the hotel, with a strict admonition to take it easy. "No more skiing for you this trip, Mr. Yates," he joked as I wheeled out of the hospital, clutching my new crutches. The hotel receptionist greeted me warmly, almost like a long-lost friend, and remarked, "We hope you'll find peace here, Mr. Yates. Your room has been specially cleaned and refreshed for your comfort." She winked discreetly at me, careful not to let Elaine notice. "There's also a welcome back drink and some snacks for you to enjoy. Have a pleasant stay." With that, she returned to her duties without acknowledging Elaine. The elevator ride was quiet and subdued. Elaine attempted light conversation, but soon realized I wasn't in the mood. She attributed it to my recent hospitalization and the fact that I hadn't been able to enjoy our holiday thus far. How mistaken she was. When I entered the room, I immediately asked Elaine to turn on the TV. "Aren't you going to sit with me for a while before watching?" she asked. "I thought you'd had your fill of that in the hospital." "You're right, Elaine," I replied sharply. "No Laney now. I just need to plug something in, if you don't mind. I can't reach it in this wheelchair. Here, it's a USB that goes into the side socket there." By then, the TV was on. I grabbed the remote and switched the input source to the USB, but it only showed a blank screen. "Very slick, Bill," Elaine tried to joke. "So, is this what you were watching while I was out shopping?" "Elaine, please sit down." The seriousness in my voice made her pause. As if in a trance, she sat, staring at the blank screen. "Elaine, I want you to tell me what you've been doing while I was in the hospital." Her face paled, but she gathered herself. "I'm waiting, Elaine." "Bill, you know what I've been doing. What's this about?" "I went shopping, visited a vineyard, and today I went to Glenorchy to take some pictures for you." She said it all in the tone of a schoolchild caught misbehaving but unwilling to admit it. "Cut the crap, Elaine," I yelled. This time she truly paled. In all our years of marriage, I'd never yelled at her in anger. "I want you to tell me what you and James, that bastard, have been up to while I was in the hospital." "Bill, oh Bill," she started to sob. "We did spend some time together. Maybe more than I should have allowed, but it just felt so right being with him. We had a great time. He's such a charming guy. I laughed at his jokes and loved how he showed me around Queenstown. He was such a support while you were recovering." She paused, looking at me with tear-filled eyes. "I'm sorry if I didn't tell you everything, but—" I interrupted her before she could finish. "Do you really think I want to hear about shopping and tours?" I grabbed the remote control and switched to the first slide on my USB drive. The picture taken last night at the Pink Panther Club was a testament to Nicole's photography skills. It showed two people dancing in a dance. He possessively put his arm around the woman's waist while holding on to an interesting place with his other hand. They merged in a kiss that was clearly beyond the scope of ordinary kisses. One of the woman's hands was on his shoulder, and the other disappeared between them. "I wonder who these two are?" I asked sarcastically. Elaine gasped, unable to take her eyes off the screen. Tears welled up in her eyes. Bill, I do not know what to say," she stammered. "Just tell me, Elaine. Is that you and James who were at the club last night?" I shouted. Yes, Bill, yes, it was, Elaine whispered, almost inaudibly. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. That's all that happened, Bill. I'm saying goodbye. I interrupted her before she could finish. Elaine, your promises mean nothing to me, I said flatly. I moved on to the next slide. This slide showed the happy couple we saw earlier outside the club in the smoking area. They were in the courtyard. A woman was sitting on a low railing. The man was next to her at waist level. They were kissing, hugging each other. It was quite obvious that they were close in public, albeit in a dark and secluded place. What? What were you just going to say, Elaine? Were you going to promise that it was just a close encounter on the dance floor? Is that what you were going to promise? Did you say promise? Anger was building, threatening to overwhelm me. I had to rein him in. Elaine was completely broken. She was sobbing, holding her head in her hands, rocking back and forth and repeating, "No, no, no." I walked over to the cooler bar and took a beer, completely ignoring Elaine. My anger at her grew to such an extent that I could no longer even think of her as Elaine. She was turning into a fraud with a low standard of living. I appreciate Glenorchy's photos today, Elaine, but now I have my own photos. They don't have much to do with the Lord of the Rings unless you were the ring and James was the Lord, who seems to have claimed you several times today. I slowly scanned the slides, and each one showed unmistakably what James and Elaine had been doing all day. In the first picture, they were captured hiding behind trees in the famous forest from Low TR. In the second picture, the couple was close on a forest floor covered with green moss. In the third picture, they were captured in the water. After seeing this third slide, Elaine fainted on the floor. Worried about her well-being, but at the same time filled with anger that I had never felt before, I considered leaving her there and leaving the hotel. However, I needed answers. The ice bucket from the refrigerator clattered onto her face. Elaine regained consciousness, coughing and groaning. She wrapped her arms around herself and curled into a fetal position on the floor. I lifted her up and placed her abruptly onto the bed. She began to repeat in a monotone, "No, Bill, I'm so sorry. I love you. Your promises and love mean nothing to me right now, Elaine. I want to know how and why this happened. How did you betray our marriage so quickly and openly? The kids, what are we going to tell them? Why did you do this, Elaine? Just tell me why. Did I do something to make you disrespect not just me, but our love for each other? Our beautiful love that we lived every day. And you threw it away for what? Some fling with that jerk. Why, Elaine? Tell me why," I was shouting again. If I didn't calm down, hotel management would intervene soon. "How did it happen, Elaine?" I whispered. "Tell me how. I've always loved you, and I thought you felt the same." She continued hugging herself as if finding solace in that position. "I don't know, Bill. I really don't know. One moment I was enjoying James's company, and the next I was captivated by him. He knew exactly what to say, what to do. He made me feel special, like a queen, his queen. His words were perfect. I didn't plan to fall for him. It just happened. I think it started on that first day of shopping. After our night out, I felt comfortable with him. My guard was down. He got along so well with you, and I trust your judgment. Part of me convinced myself that if you trusted him, so could I. I'm not blaming you, Bill. Please don't think that from what I've just said." Her eyes pleaded with me. She wanted to continue the conversation, but then she burst into another fit of sobbing. I was furious at her and her stupidity. For a moment I thought about getting her something to drink and some napkins, but that desire passed quickly. Instead, I chose to leave her alone so she could come to her senses. Bill, James was so charming. By the end of that first day, when we went shopping and looked around the city, I was completely bewitched by him. He started touching me whenever he could. I was so comfortable with him that I didn't even perceive these touches as inappropriate. They became so familiar that I found myself missing them when they weren't around. I'm ashamed to admit, but I began to look forward to his touch. By the end of the day, his arm was almost constantly hugging me. Bill, I'm truly sorry, but talking to him brought back memories of our youth and the tour together. I felt such happiness, which I had not felt for a very long time. The more he talked and touched me, the less I thought about you. She sobbed again, almost howled. How could I forget about you, Bill? Looking back, I feel deeply ashamed of what I felt, or rather did not feel. That evening, he invited me to dance at the Pink Panther Club. I would never have dared to go to such a place alone before, but James knew exactly what to say. He immediately calmed me down. He kept buying me drinks, and even though I wasn't drunk, I definitely felt the urge. His constant touch and presence became familiar, and before I knew it, we were dancing in close contact. He hugged me tightly, but it felt strangely right. He whispered compliments about how great I looked, how wonderful this moment was, and how much he missed me and wanted us to be together. His flattery combined with the booze and his incredible closeness stunned me. When he kissed me, I responded almost automatically. By the end of the evening, we were inseparable, kissing, hugging, and touching each other everywhere. Bill, how could I do this? You are the love of my life, and yet I have allowed myself to fall so low. When he finally dropped me off at the hotel in the early morning, it seemed to me that I had spent several hours in the shower. I wanted to wash away the shame of what happened, especially before I saw you again. I almost died when you noticed how tired I looked the next morning. But Bill, I was still looking forward to meeting James that day. What's wrong with me? She began to wring her hands and beat her head anxiously with her open palms, as if trying to wake up from a terrible dream. I still desired to see him again. I desperately wanted to see him again. He picked me up from outside the hospital that morning and immediately started being affectionate. I fell under his charm once more. We dined at a secluded cafe away from the main street. It felt very intimate, more fitting for a young married couple than for us. But I began to feel like we were a couple. How messed up was that? I was actually enjoying the attention he was giving me, and worse still, I craved more. Her voice was almost raised now. The gravity of her actions was starting to sink in. It didn't make me feel any better, but I knew I had to hear the rest. With each word she spoke, each sordid detail she admitted to, my anger grew, but still, I let her continue. My silence must have unsettled her, yet she pressed on. After breakfast, he took me for a walk around the city again. Me. I have to admit my duplicity in all this, Bill. I assure you, I am honest. I understand that my words may not mean much to you right now, and I don't blame you at all. I know I've hurt you deeply, and to be honest, I'm not sure how I can patch up the hole in your heart. He started kissing me at every opportunity. We stopped at a shop window and kissed. Walking down the alley, he stopped, hugged, and kissed me. His constant attention only increased my desire. I got to the point where I wanted him to just take me and get it over with, but he kept teasing me all morning. By lunchtime, I felt like his princess. He was my knight in shining armor, and he knew it. He played with me like an experienced musician playing an instrument. He was the master, and I was his toy. He knew exactly when he got me, and he didn't hesitate to invite me to his house. Without hesitation, I agreed. I felt like I had become someone completely different. A loving, devoted mother and wife have disappeared. I became his desire, wanting to be in bed with him. And it happened. I had to stop. I had to see you. I was overcome with guilt for what I had done, and I left as soon as I could. I returned home, took a shower, and tried to collect my thoughts. What have I done? Stop it, Elaine. What you've done is a betrayal of everything we promised each other. My voice sounded strained. Listening to the candid details about the exploits of this jerk was excruciating, especially knowing that it was with my wife, my love. You were in the hospital day and night pretending that everything was fine, and at the same time the two of you were secretly together behind my back. Elaine, there's no way to fix this. This just can't be happening. I do not know what we will do next, but what I saw and heard is what I saw and heard. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it. I needed to hear from you about what you and that jerk James did. When you tried to downplay it earlier, I realized that part of you still thinks that what you did was good. What gives a man like him the right to destroy someone else's marriage just to satisfy himself? I found out that in Queenstown he has a reputation for being able to do this. He ruined so many marriages. No wonder his wife divorced him at all. He cheated on her from the very beginning. Elaine then did something that dealt the final blow to our marriage. She defended him. Bill, no. It wasn't like that, she said. I did ask James why he pursued me so persistently. He told me that ever since we met as teenagers, he was infatuated with me. He regretted not pursuing me further back then. If circumstances had been different, he would have followed me home and continued what we started innocently years ago. He always kept me in his thoughts, even after he married. He wasn't happy in his marriage and sought more, which is why he was involved with other women. When I reached out to him about our reunion, he was overjoyed, and that's how things unfolded between us now. She looked at me with pleading eyes once more. I couldn't believe this justification. Elaine was siding with him completely. She was trying to explain away their actions as a consequence of unresolved feelings from their teenage years. Unbelievable. And what about you, Elaine? Why did you choose to do what you did? I demanded. Don't tell me you felt the same way he did, that you always regretted not pursuing things further back then. I really want to know. Elaine began to wring her hands, a familiar gesture indicating her deep concentration. Bill, it was like something clicked in me that first day. I felt like he had transported me back to my teenage years. It was like a light switch that turned on and off. When he turned it on, he was in control of the situation, and you and I, were turned off. I can't explain it any other way. When James filled my mind, there was no room for us. And filled you up, I interjected sarcastically. Yeah, me too, Bill, she retorted angrily. Her frustration with her situation was beginning to overshadow her guilt. Being close to James was stressful, Bill. He was like an animal. I've always liked being close to you, Bill, but this was different. She paused, realizing the weight of her words. The conversation was over for me. I've heard and seen enough. Her last remark plunged me into a state of emotional despair from what my love had just said and done. You need to leave, Elaine. Right now. I'll call the desk clerk and a taxi will be waiting for you in 10 minutes. Pack your things and leave. I don't care where, just away from me. I turned away from her. Elaine hesitated for a moment, but realized that it was useless to argue. She packed her things, quietly repeating to herself, No, Bill. You are my life. My life is over without you. My life is over. My life is over. The taxi arrived and she departed. The receptionist smiled knowingly as Mrs. Yates bid her farewell. Such scenes were familiar, yet she maintained her courteous demeanor with the hotel's guests. Reflecting on Elaine's words, my anger grew. I knew there was one final task ahead. Courtney, how are you? Good to catch you off duty. What's that? No, it didn't go well, hence the call. Could you compile a list of all the marriages that jerk, James, has broken up? All right, thanks for trying. Oh, and pass on to Nicole that I was really impressed with her work. I'll be at our hotel if you find anything. Okay. Bye. 2 days later, Courtney left a large envelope for me at reception. Opening it, I saw the immense effort she had put in. Courtney, you're amazing, I murmured to myself. The list contained nearly 30 couples, some still married but most separated or divorced. Courtney had included contact numbers for almost everyone affected. This was invaluable. I had calls to make. 2 days after that, I boarded my flight home. I managed to visit Glenorchy. I wanted my memory of that place to remain pure and innocent, unlike the sordid, explicit scenes depicted in Nicole's photos. After returning home, I engaged lawyers to initiate divorce proceedings. My children were deeply dismayed by how things unfolded. They were utterly shocked. They couldn't comprehend why their mother, who they saw as dependable and stable, would resort to such actions. I refrained from explaining much, leaving that task to what I now thought of as the dam. I chose this term deliberately, not just out of anger, but to coldly and logically categorize her actions. I remained completely bewildered by how someone so warm-hearted, loving, compassionate, and loyal could exhibit such animalistic behavior, as the dam herself described it. It troubled me greatly, consuming my thoughts every day. I eventually sought counseling to deal with this and other issues stemming from our divorce. While it's helped me manage the anger and confusion from this sordid affair, it hasn't eased my loneliness. Laughter no longer fills this house. Each morning I still set out 2 coffee cups in the kitchen, anticipating Elaine to bound in and share her dreams. Oh, how I miss the old Laney. But not those dreams of hers, they were a curse. John and Mary, bless them, recognized my loneliness and spent as much time with me as they could. I'm even considering selling the house and moving closer to where they are studying. They become city dwellers and don't plan on leaving anytime soon. Our divorce proceeded smoothly. I settled Elaine's share of the house payment without any issues. I packed and shipped all her belongings to New Zealand, where she was living with her partner. Before packing, I accidentally urinated on some of her clothes. Actually, on all of them. I then carefully packed everything in garbage bags and boxes. Each photo she requested I edited meticulously to show only her, along with an image of a female dog. I felt this was a fitting form of justice. After all, she betrayed our marriage, so. Later, Courtney informed me that things weren't going well between Elaine and her partner. James had started cheating on Elaine again. Predictably, Elaine was furious. Turns out cheaters don't like being cheated on. According to Courtney, James didn't take well to Elaine telling him to stop. He resorted to physical violence, enough to land Elaine in the hospital. This was how Courtney came to know about their situation. She mentioned that during Elaine's medicated sleep, she kept repeating, "My life is over. My life is over." Elaine fell into depression and began taking strong medication. The newspaper article briefly reported an incident involving the burning of Mr. James Sloop's apartment, suggesting a failed robbery as the cause. According to the report, unknown armed men entered the apartment, attacked Mr. Sloop, and, in a hurry to escape, set fire to the room, resulting in the deaths of Mr. Sloop and his neighbor, who saved him from illegal substances. After reading the article, I felt a sense of relief. I didn't wish for their deaths, but sometimes karma has its way, though admittedly karma sometimes needs a nudge. Out of the many men I contacted after leaving New Zealand, around 20 or so began drinking together at a local bar, discussing the person they blamed for their failed marriages. Setting the newspaper aside, I addressed the spirit of my deceased ex-wife aloud. "You were right, my dear. Your intuition was somewhat accurate. You did foresee James, and now your life is over. Completely over. But what you didn't foresee was that our life, filled with so much love and time together, was also finished."